Welcome to the Justice Lens, where we examine everything through a justice lens. And as promised, we are going to be talking about genocides, very specific genocides that have happened last year and that are ongoing, because this is something that we just cannot look away from. We have to continue to remind ourselves that there are genocides happening around the world, and we got to do whatever we can to stop them from happening. And so on this episode, we are going to talk about Sudan, because yes, there is a genocide happening in Sudan. I don't know what you've seen, if you've heard anything, if you're keeping up. It's hard to find good news these days, but there is a genocide happening in Sudan, and we have to talk about it. We're going to have to talk about it because in Sudan, you have entire communities being targeted, ethnic communities being wiped out. You have women and girls being abducted and mistreated, raped, abused by militias, by these soldiers. You have complete devastation across the country of Sudan, and it's a genocide. So today on this episode, we're going to talk about three major things. We're going to talk about three main things. One, who's doing the genocide? Two, who's enabling the genocide? And three, is there anything we can do about stopping this genocide? Anything at all? And so let's just get right to it. If you're unaware of the background, the history, the short version is April 2023, you have two rival groups. You have the Sudanese Armed Forces. You have the Rapid Support Forces. These are two opposing armies. The Sudanese forces represent the government's official army and military. The Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, represent a paramilitary militia group. Now, there is a lot of backstory behind how these two came to be the ones fighting against each other. The quick version is back maybe, 10, 15 years ago, brutal dictator Omar al-Bashir was running the country. He had his Sudanese armed forces, and he also had in his back pocket this militia group that kind of did his bidding. And so there's the official one and the unofficial one. And when there was an uprising and an attempt to oust the dictator, the two armies rose up along with the people. The people began to protest, began to demand that this dictator get out of there. The armies saw what the public was doing, joined with them, removed the dictator. And so now you have these two armies, these two generals that lead these armies, basically in control of the country. They could not agree. They couldn't get along, and they were fighting for power, and they couldn't agree on how to move forward. First, there was a civilian transitional government that they were supposed to help keep in place for elections. They got rid of them. They were trying to figure out how they're going to do their military hierarchy, who's first, who's second. They couldn't get along there either. And so April 2023, shots fired. War breaks out. It's called a civil war because it's the two armies within Sudan fighting each other for power. It's bigger than that. It's a big story. I wish I knew more about it. I'm learning just as much as people are as they're reading. But what we know for sure is that the Sudanese armed forces, Rapid Support Forces, fighting to gain control of the country. And so that's what we have. And that's what we've had for the last 2 years. And if you think the RSF is a new militia group that kind of just sprung up during the dictatorship, you'd be wrong. Because this militia group came out of what were called the Janjaweed militias back in the early 2000s, late 90s. And if you were around back then, you may have heard about the genocide in Darfur, where they were wiping out communities back then. This militia was going through and eliminating the populations throughout the state of Darfur in Sudan. That was this Janjaweed militia, which then became the Rapid Support Forces, which then the dictator took under his wing and used to do his own bidding across the country. And so that's where that group came from. The Sudanese forces were the official government forces. And there you have it. You have these two groups fighting for power. And so what does that fight look like? It's not just your basic, draw your weapons. Let's see which army beats out the other army. This war is full of atrocities. You should read the UN study. It's literally called Sudan, a war of atrocities, because of the way that both forces are conducting their military operations, full of atrocities, targeting civilians, gender-based violence, wiping out entire villages, bombing schools, hospitals, cutting off aid. All of these things are happening in this conflict. So many atrocities are taking place. None of these things are legal. You cannot prosecute a war this way. It doesn't matter what you're fighting for. This is not the way you do it. And when you read the reports, you'll see that both armies are guilty of these atrocities, these war crimes. This is what's happening all across Sudan. This is what's happening. And so when you see families getting completely eliminated, when you see the entire civil structure, society completely demolished from village to village, this is how you get a genocide. This is how you end up in a place where civilians, families, children, women, nobody feels safe, no matter who's around. It's not as though the government forces are protecting the civilians and the militias aren't. Everyone is killing civilians. Everyone is looking at whoever they think is the enemy or who is aligned with the enemy and taking them out no matter what. And so that is what's happening in Sudan at the moment. But now when we talk about specifically what a genocide is, remember the definition of genocide: acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a protected group, right? It's just a group of people, not necessarily a militia, it's just a group. It could be an ethnic group, a religious group, a national group. You're trying to get rid of that group. And so what's interesting is the RSF in particular, they're not just fighting the Sudanese armed forces. What they're trying to do, what it appears, is that they're going after any and every non-Arab community and trying to eliminate them, trying to take them out because they want Sudan to be an Arab country, right? We don't want any other groups in this country. And so when they go around from village to village, what's being documented is that they are specifically targeting these non-Arab communities for destruction, right? They're deliberately trying to eliminate these groups from the country. And so this is not something that's new to them, right? This happens. This is what they've done. This is what they continue to do. This is one of the reasons why there's a South Sudan. So back in 2011, part of the ways that they ended the civil war back then was to split the country. And so the non-Arab communities, the Christian communities, the animist communities, the more secular parts of the country broke away and became South Sudan, while Sudan remained with the idea that they were going to be able to govern themselves more effectively. But of course, it hasn't happened. And we're back again here with the Civil War. And so while it's clear that both sides, let me be very clear about this, both sides are committing atrocious, horrific, indefensible acts, mass murders, gender-based violence, aid restrictions. They're both doing that. What's being determined when it comes to genocide is that the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, are actually doing it specifically to eliminate whole communities of non-Arab peoples. That's what's happening. That's what's being called out. And that's why when you look at an official designation of genocide, that's what you'll see more and more of. You'll see people talk about how these communities are being specifically targeted because of who they are, not because of who they're aligned with, because of who they are for destruction. And so they'll say that RSF has clearly committed genocide in this war. And so that's what is being discussed when people talk about this genocide in Sudan. Now, we could just stop there and say, hey, stop, RSF, enough. Let's end the war. Let's bring some peace. But that's not how it goes, because genocides don't happen on their own. Especially in these kinds of countries, these conflicts, they don't have the capacity to inflict this kind of violence by themselves. They're getting massive support, massive funding, massive engagement from outside to come in and commit these atrocities. And so who's behind it? Who's enabling it? Who's supporting it? That's the question. That's what we have to get down under when we think about how we want to get these things and bring them to an end. Who's behind it? And the evidence is very clear. Numerous reports, numerous journalists, lots of publications have noted the influence of the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, that they have been funding and supporting the RSF with money, with weapons. They're buying resources directly from the RSF to support and fund them as they carry out their, I guess you can call it a military operation. It's a genocide. To carry out a genocide. They are supporting it. They are clearly complicit in these genocidal acts. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. Now, we could just stop there and say, UAE, stop. But of course, we have wars from both sides. We have wars from both directions. And so the Sudanese armed forces, the RSF, they're all being supported by somebody, right? They're major players in Sudan, in Africa, trying to destabilize this part of the world so they can access the resources. So people are picking sides, right? So the UAE is over here with the RSF. There's Saudi Arabia, there's Egypt, there's Russia, there's China. Everybody's coming in trying to play a role in this conflict so they can have access to what's available when it's all said and done. Because, surprise, there's lots of resources in Sudan, primarily gold and oil. And so people want access. And so I wish it was just as simple as people trying to figure out who's in charge and who runs the country. But there's so many outside influences, it's hard to disentangle those interests from what's actually happening on the ground. All I can tell you is it's a genocide. It's a genocide, clearly a genocide. And we have to call it out, recognize it, and demand an end to it. We just have to. And for the Sudanese people, these discussions don't mean anything, right? It doesn't matter if the RSF is this and the Sudanese armed forces is that, and all they see is death, destruction, destabilization, insecurity all around them. And you don't know who to trust. You don't know who is fighting for the people of Sudan and who is actually fighting for themselves and for their own interests. And so you can't, if a Sudanese armed forces unit comes to your town, we don't know why they're coming. We don't know what's going on there. You can't just say, oh, thank you, I'm glad you're here. You might be a victim of what they're trying to do. The RSF comes, you don't know why they're coming. You don't know what's going on. All you know is there's a war and you could be the next victim in that war. And so it's just easy to say this. There is genocide happening in Sudan and it needs to stop. Now, formally, when it comes to designating it a genocide, the United States has done it back last January, issued a statement saying that the RSF's actions, particularly in certain parts of the country, constituted genocide. They said that good. They made that clear. I haven't seen too many other major countries or organizations say that it's a genocide. I have seen a lot of warnings, right? Genocide risks. It's potentially going to become one, is what a lot of people are saying. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, these other organizations, the UN, they're saying, hey, we're on the verge of one. We're on the precipice of one. We need to stop before we get there. And so that's what I've been seeing a lot of writing about. But it's just clear to me that what we're seeing, what we're reading, and what's happening on the ground meets that threshold. I'm not an expert, obviously. I'm not a scholar. And honestly, when the US says something, I don't always believe it because, hey, there's lots of conflicts like this in the world, but you're not calling them all genocides. And so, when they say it, I wonder why they're saying it. Why are we saying it and nobody else is? But nevertheless, I agree that there's a genocide happening on the ground. I'm sure the Sudanese people would say that they're being slaughtered and murdered at enormously high rates. And we all agree that Sudan is currently the world's worst humanitarian crisis, period. There is no dispute. The number of people displaced, the need for food, hunger, famine, no water, no electricity, nothing. It's a horrible catastrophe in Sudan. And so there's no doubt about that. And so I know this is about genocide. We're talking about genocides, but just on a human level, we need to get this problem solved. We need to fix this. We need to address all these issues, these fires. We need to let aid in. We need to do all kinds of things for the Sudanese people. Unfortunately, I don't see a lot of engagement on the Sudanese question, on the Sudanese issues. Hard to find good news coverage, hard to find, regular reporting. It's difficult to really understand the dynamics. I've seen a few good people. I'll put their information in the description of this video, but all in all, it's hard to get good information about Sudan. And so what we need, let's put our justice lens back on. What we need is good information, good reporting. We need to amplify those who are in Sudan, who are reporting on the issues on the ground. They need to be platformed, they need to be amplified. Who are they? What are they seeing? What are they saying? What is it like for an average Sudanese family in this conflict? We need that, right? We need to pressure our people. We need to pressure our government, our officials, to actually do something meaningful with respect to the conflict. We're friends with some of these countries. We need to get them to stop arming these militias, arming these groups that are committing these atrocities. We need to actually step in and lead when it comes to diplomatic efforts. We currently have a president who is bragging about all the wars he's ended. Well, here's one. You can end this one. End this one. If you want to talk about what you've been doing, here's one to end. End this conflict. Step in with your whatever you believe are your best traits, and let's bring an end to the world's worst humanitarian crisis. That's what we need, right? We have to continue to support these humanitarian groups, these aid organizations who are trying to get humanitarian aid into the country, trying to get food into the country, trying to get medicine into the country, trying to get water. We need to continue to support them, right? This is a justice thing. We're not here just to say it's a genocide and to just check the box and say that we, said the right thing at the right time. We want these things to end. And so to do that, we need to pressure the people in charge to do it. We need arms embargoes. Arms embargoes. We need to prevent weapons from entering into these places where these atrocities are taking place. Because I promise you, the RSF doesn't have a weapons facility where they're building guns and bombs. They don't have that infrastructure. The Sudanese forces don't have that either. Keep the weapons out, bring the aid in, and let's solve the problem. That's what we need to do. And I would personally love to see some more active resistance from people, right? Some protesting, more calls to action, more petitions, more letter writing campaigns, something to say, hey, we don't want this to continue. And with Sudan, I think it would be easier for people to actually get in line because there's no real controversy there. We all agree. We see what's happening. We know what's going on. Let's bring it into it. Because at the end of the day, genocides like these happen when we don't take action. Genocides happen when we allow people to operate with unlimited resources and with no accountability whatsoever. And we can end that. We should end that. We need to end that, right? It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't. We can end the genocide in Sudan. We can stop the fighting. We can end the horror that we're seeing in Sudan, because the Sudanese people, they're like any other people in the world. They deserve protection from these atrocities. They deserve justice for those families who have been the victims of these atrocities. And they deserve accountability for the people who committed those atrocities. They deserve justice for that. And anybody watching this video, anybody who wants to learn more, I'll put some resources in the description. But please, fight. Fight to end the genocide in Sudan. Whatever it takes. We can stop the killing. We can stop the violence. We can bring an end to this horrific chapter in the world, not just in Sudan, but across the world. It's a stain on all of us that we've allowed this to go on as long as it has. And it needs to stop. And so keep fighting. Don't stop fighting until justice has been achieved. Don't stop.